Dear audience, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Rosane Badan. I am a PhD in Industrial Design and Multimedia Communication by Politecnico di Milano in Italy and a professor of College of Visual Arts in the Federal University of Goiás in Brazil. The discussion of this presentation focused in particular on the relations involved in indigenous cosmology and Brazilian design. The research study has not addressed the shapes of objects, but the process that transforms and restructures them. In this context, the state of the art promotes a discussion between the shamanic culture and design as two complementary categories. In conclusion, the results show that there is a cyclical correspondence between the contemporary world and the ancestral world. Design in Brazil has been qualified on the international circuit as something mysterious which reproposes itself as a novelty. Within a rationality also interpreted as magic, the designer in Brazil is able to perceive the relationship between the man and the environment where he lives in. This magic approach seems to lie in the ability of the contemporary Brazilian designer in uniting the thoughts concerning the Western rationality with those related to the shamanistic logic. While the scientific knowledge follows reason and requires full transparency to reality, indigenous knowledge has a mystical mentality which wishes that a certain human density might be embodied to reality. The propedeutic information leads to the presupposition that the most appropriate starting point for this research is to penetrate in the mythical wisdom of shamans, which is linked to its cosmology. Shamanic traditions, with their paths of exploration and their methods of experimentation, are a knowledge that transcends the vision limits of the Western world and offers resources to man in order that he can reach the complex, immaterial, expressive, and communicative horizons. The proposition is to do a comparative parallel between these two ways of knowledge within a vertical vision more than a horizontal one. If this dialogue is believable, if this path is expressed in coherent reflections, the autochthon thinks has a change to benefit designers to use magic intuitiveness in a conscious and sapient way, allowing the emergence of a new reality. This work deals with the issue of design in the context of anthropology, more specifically of the Amerindian material culture and the modern project culture in Brazil. The basic goal is to demonstrate that the designer in Brazil is able to merge thoughts related to shamanistic logic with those regarding the Western rationality. As a result, one creates objects imbued with renewed energies. In this panel, the region that embraces Amazon was elected the area of interest to the development of the thesis. This area is the place of conservation of a new primitive condition which contrasts with the contemporary civilization. It presents a physical and cultural space that allows a discussion of native lifestyle tradition and its relation to the culture of Brazilian modern project. In concomitance to this first step, it was made necessary to define the subject that interacts with the object to be studied. Through the choice to predeterminate criteria, designers and shamans were individualized. Immediately after these first key elements were identified, it became evident the qualitative character of the research. For this reason, the methodological principles utilized for collecting, the analysis and interpretation of data were based in two strategies, ethnography and case study. On what concerns ethnographic investigation, this was interested by the anthropological emphasis which encompasses indigenous material culture and the perspective of design. The goal is to understand the Amazonian cosmology and to recognize which designers suit the research. Regarding the case study, it has the function of analyzing the Brazilian phenomenon, instituting a dialogue between indigenous tradition and its relation to the culture of Brazilian modern projects. By searching an internal loop that is able to immerse the core of native cultures, I have tried to understand the meaning of the objects of Amazonian peoples. Thus, the action field exploited for building the state-of-the-art corresponded to Amerindian daily life, their domestic place, ceremonial rites, and work. All bibliographic references either come from direct examination of primary sources such as iconographic material, manifestos, statements, or ethnographic and anthropological reports, or from consultation of secondary sources constituted by books and scientific papers. In an effort to translate meaningfully the raw data, the analysis led me to an organizational and critical hypothesis of a complex reality. Truthfully, I became aware of a relation between indigenous cosmology and the culture of the modern project in Brazil, supported by concepts of empirical and intuitive nature. Hence, it emerged the hypothesis of an experimental fundament based on the shamanic practices of the Amazonian Amerindians, and which manifests itself in Brazilian contemporary design. Taking this hypothesis of the mystical grassroots into account, I have gathered information from different perspectives considering uniquely mythological, sociological, and special aspects related to the typology of longhouses and villages. The goal was to confront the basis elements of some indigenous tribes in opposition to design in Brazil and introduce the dimension Indians in Brazilian metropolis. I also have investigated the morphology of some favelas in Brazil. These urban agglomerations are hybrid, murable, incomplete, and set some of the most relevant architectural manifestations in Brazil. The architecture is vernacular and offers a universe of space-time quite different from the academic propositions. Moreover, they have their own aesthetics with peculiar features which distinguish themselves completely from the aesthetic of the city that is known as formal. The analysis results have indicated that the relation between the mode of Indians living and Brazilian design is not formal in nature, but in philosophical nature. Afterwards, the issue that involves the indigenous tradition and the culture of the modern project in Brazil presupposes a symbiotic relation. It seems that designers and shamans, even though being of different nature, have developed an analogous systems in order to structure their worlds. This interaction, although being resultant from an artistic intuition, takes into account the evolutionary process of historical development of Brazilian design, whose universe is created from autochthonous and European parameters, and from the cosmological structure noticed by peoples of the indigenous tribes of Amazon. Finally, I developed a scheme which contains both indigenous culture and the culture of Brazilian modern project. On the one hand, studies about the Amazonian cosmology would allow me to identify and to generalize three basic principles arising from indigenous culture: correspondence, contiguity, and experimentation. On the other hand, I took into consideration the framework organized by Jacques regarding the conception figures of favelas: fragment, labyrinth, rhizome. Inserting thus all these elements in a graphic scheme, I could delineate a bridge capable of linking the two parts, indigenous culture and the culture of modern project in Brazil, and demonstrate the probable symbiosis that exists as a subjective dimension between indigenous cosmology and Brazilian contemporary design. After a deep-end analysis of Brazilian phenomenon, the research detected the existence of a relation between shamanic culture and design. Apparently, these theories and new concepts indicate that Brazilian designers have a shamanistic behavior. That is, in order to develop a project, a designer goes beyond the rational methodological paradigm by action as a page of industrial product in a process that recreates the original matter, whether it is natural or industrial. Unlike countries with difficulties in accepting certain changes of behavior or materiality thanks to their long history, Brazil is a nation able to change and to expand the line in which it is following in design from a moment to another due to the ephemerality of its material identity. It is the use of this transient and popular creativity that Brazilian young designers have sought innovation in fast and cheaper solutions by resolving several problems of material character. These professionals have found new resources to produce their pieces without appealing to large companies. Besides the aesthetical experimentation, Brazilian design tends to focus on the everyday reality of the country. The paper discussion did not focus on evaluating the stylistic elements that involve the material universe of shamanic world, nor the one of the world of Brazilian design. One of the aims was to show that no Western civilizations have logics which are rich of energy, capable of giving a renewed content to the current projects. The ethnic existential implications of the shamanic aesthetic of Amazon in India were more focused on the reading of symbolical meanings than on figurative codes. Thus, analysis of the Brazilian phenomenon shows that Brazil participates increasingly of the worldwide market by avoiding stereotypes by creating different shapes from the transformation of existing materials. Among the mechanisms of the ancestral logic and the ones of the rational logic, the aim of Brazilian contemporary design is to relate itself simultaneously with handcraft production, industrial production, and with artistic production. The results of the research highlight, therefore, that between the Amerindian shaman and the Brazilian designer may be indicated a homological validity on the theoretical compendium, either being in the thought or in the way of production of both. Notwithstanding, design in Brazil is not magic. It is not art, it is not science, even though it keeps close relations with them. In attention to this validity, I developed a diagram in order to demonstrate that among the contemporary world, which includes the architecture of favelas and design cosmology, and ancestral world, in this case the process of shamanistic instruction and indigenous cosmology, there is a cyclical correlation. At the theoretical field, the bridge which links the four manifestations is shaped by three basic principles that come from Amazonian native culture: experimentation, contiguity, and correspondence. Considering the complex phenomena in constant transformation which were observed in both symbolical universes, emergent theories suggest that designers of contemporary era are not so interested in producing definitive designs. In analogy to the Chinatown fragmentation, to the native life condition, and to the transformationist process of Amerindian shamans, the expectation of Brazilian designer is to experiment the unknown in order to propose systems of diverse nature, imperfect, unfinished, and that can be adapted to a context which interconnects with numerous responsible logics by the configuration of the world today. The results of the research reveal that design in Brazil tends to approach a depletion of the experimental necessity in direction to an evolutionary line that blends consciously the Western rationality and shamanic magic. Thank you very much.